one decision away from a totally different financial life. That's something I actually heard a little bit earlier today, and it rings true in this video. Now, learning from the best, very, very good, smart advice. When you start looking at the 1%, there are things that they do that other people do not, really setting them apart, and wanting to improve your finances can be one of those. So in today's video, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at. Some of the things that really the top 1% of individuals do and how it makes a difference when it comes to your financials. Starting with the first one, they do not overspend on vehicles. Now, being a financial counselor, this is one of the absolute biggest things that you think. When you really look at self-made millionaires, they buy cars outright. Now, it's not the Ferraris, the Maseratis. It is not the super expensive cars. But if they do buy more expensive cars, they pay for them in cash. They buy them outright. In addition, they are not overspending for these cars, and they keep these cars for a lot of time. Now, for this case, I'm going to use myself. So we bought a vehicle. Car payment was roughly $600 every single month, and we took that loan out for 75 months. So thinking of 75 months, $600 a month, not only the interest that would be accumulated at about 6.5%, but that also removes and takes away the ability for you to invest that $600 a month. Of course, for me personally, again, doing the financial education piece, we paid it off in about 16, 17 months. And we started putting that $600 into an investment account. And of course, we buy used. This is one of the absolute biggest fallacies that we see. When you start looking at the cost of new vehicles, you're talking north of $50,000 is average. Then you put it at 7%, you're looking at $600+ for an average payment on a vehicle. If you're looking for a vehicle that's a year or two old, let's say 15, 20,000 miles, still has a lot of value, but a ton of the depreciation has already been assessed to that vehicle, meaning that you're not going to be stuck with that depreciating asset, because a lot of the depreciation when you drove it off the lot or whoever bought it first is going to be there. Now, of course, the general rule of thumb is 10% of your take-home pay. That is something to note. Now, it is not your net pay. It is the take-home pay. 10% of that should be your car payment. Now, of course, overspending on cars is one of the absolute biggest money mistakes that we make, because when you start looking at that, it's giving you less money to save. It's giving you less money to invest. It's also giving you less money to really repay if you have any debt. If you're taking and you get an expensive car payment, chances are it's going to be negative equity. If you're buying a new vehicle, it's very hard to get out of it as well when it comes to overspending on vehicles. And this is a part that we can really control. When you start looking at some vehicles, let's say $20,000, $30,000 range, you can finance them over, 6 months, making your payment affordable, because you also have to remember when you have that car payment. So let's say, for instance, you have that $650 car payment, chances are $150, $250 is going to be insurance. Now you're looking at $800, $900 for a car payment, depending where your payment and your insurance do land, which again is super expensive. People are not driving as much as they used to, and we've really seen this. Second one in here, they invest in the stock market, not knowing and really thinking, when you start thinking of the 1%, savings is not enough. And I really do stress this on the channel. When it comes to money, it is a depreciating asset. It is going to be eaten up from inflation. Money is meant to be invested. Now, of course, with inflation, it is going to gradually lose value. Building your wealth, it has to be put into assets, and it has to be put into assets that increase value. That is the reason why the investing, and me personally, I really focus on building out those ETFs, looking at your S&P 500, the VOO, looking at, the QQQM, looking at the HD. Anything like this is going to have an asset, and it's going to be an appreciating asset, and it also is going to pay you passive income. It's kind of a win-win-win when you get to the point of being able to invest and being able to invest a considerable amount. Now, when you start looking at the stock market, kind of big picture, averages about a 10% per year. Now, of course, can fluctuate year to year. 2022, we've seen a down year. 23 and so far in 24, we have seen an up year. So the average across that S&P 500 is about 10%. So literally, if you're putting money in there on a consistent basis, even just investing in the VOO or the spider funds, just investing in the S&P 500 index itself, which is a huge popular option, you can make a almost pretty much guaranteed 10% return. And I say that with a grain of salt because it's not guaranteed, but over the long term, it is roughly 10%. When we look at the third one in here, Plenty of money in the emergency fund. The emergency fund is the really the method and the logic behind what I really focus on. Number one, of course, is the emergency fund. Could be a car accident, a medical issue, job loss. There are so many things that you could go into debt for an emergency, which we do not. We do not want you to get high interest debt, staying away from the credit card, staying away from the personal loans. That is the reason why the emergency fund is really in place before you start doing anything. Now, for a majority of people, they say generally 3 to 6 months of living expenses. For me, I say it's kind of dependent on your job. If you have a job that is in very high demand, you're pretty well set. I would probably stick more to the 3 to 4 months. If you have a job, let's say that's seasonal based, that might be sales based, a lot of things that could be affected by the economy, or if there's a downturn, I would probably look to 5 to 6 months, or even more depending on that situation. And of course, this has to be one of your savings goals. It has to be one of the very first savings goal. If we turn back to Dave Ramsey and the baby steps, first he says emergency fund of $1,000, which is a starter emergency fund or a baby emergency fund. And from there, doing the debt repayment. Now, of course, my take on that is definitely getting first and foremost, if you have a 401k employer match, which we'll talk about in just a minute, getting that, then looking at the emergency fund, then going right into that debt repayment phase. Of course, when you're eliminating debt and when you're paying it down, it is going to give you the ability to invest more money, save more money, make more money buying assets than you are paying down the debt. Now, of course, the next one we look at, tax advantage opportunities. When you start looking at those 401k plans, when you start looking at those IRAs, they are the game changer. I know a lot of people, social media, looking at TikTok, Instagram, even YouTube, a lot of people out there say that 401ks are a scam. They're a sham. IRAs are a scam. They are investment vehicles for retirement. Now, of course, there's a multitude of places, but when you start looking at wealth, over 90% of self-made millionaires are investing, and these tax advantage accounts are no different. So if I'm putting in, let's say 5%, my employer is matching 5%, I am automatically getting 100% return on the money that they're contributing, which makes a big difference. Then you couple it with saving money, putting it into IRA accounts, even doing backdoor IRAs or doing Roth IRAs, which I really stress. Getting a Roth 401k, getting a Roth IRA is not going to give you an upfront tax advantage, what you see with the traditional products. But when you start looking at the Roth and when you start thinking of the big picture of a financial retirement and a financial plan, the Roths do make sense. And I really do stress and push them for everyone that I'm sitting again with that financial counseling and the education piece. The Roth, of course, you're going to pay your taxes up front, but then when it comes down the road, when you're looking at your 10, 20, 30, 40 years of growth you're seeing in these big retirement accounts, you do not have to pay taxes when you take the money out, which is a game changer for the rest of your life. And of course, the final one that we kind of touched on a little bit, avoiding bad debt. When you think of debt and taking on debt, there is really good debt and there is bad debt. I don't like breaking it up because that seems like it is super simplified. But when you start thinking of big picture, you need a place to live. You need a home, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a condo, whether it's a home, you have to have a place to live. There is going to be a place and probably a time for a majority of us where we don't have the ability to buy a home just with cash. You're going to need a car, but this is where it comes a little bit different because are you buying a $20,000 car that is going to get you to A and B? Might not be super expensive, might not be super flashy, making that payment affordable and giving you the ability to repay debt or to invest the money. Or are you looking at a car that is $70,000, $80,000? That is going to strain your budget, not only for the payment itself, but also looking at the insurance. And of course, again, when you start looking at debt, even looking at student loan debt, as much as I don't like student loan debt, if it is going to put you in a better position for the rest of your life by borrowing money to go to school, getting an education, getting a degree, essentially advanced careers, that is going to be a game changer. And I would really take it as good debt. When you start looking at bad debt, that is the total opposite, which of course the big focus here is credit cards. When you start looking at the average credit card debt, it is roughly about 25%, which of course is guaranteed that you're going to have to pay that 25%. That is where it is the game changer. If there was an investment out there that would guarantee me a 25% like what we're paying on credit cards, it would 100% have everyone in the world investing in it because of course there are no guarantees. except that you're gonna have to pay this credit card debt. And of course, once you get rid of this, there is no long-term value to holding this debt. You don't get any benefit. You're not building an asset. It is absolutely the worst thing to do. All right, guys, just a couple money habits that the 1% really focus on. So let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next video.